Recently, I did a video where I went over a few possibilities for what could happen with our stuff, our gear, our levels, and everything like that going forwards. But there was one thing that I kinda glossed over and ignored, and that was materia. My thinking was that we'd encounter Yuffie probably quite early on in Remake Part 2, and that she'd be involved in some sort of materia reset, stealing your materia or something like that. It made the most sense based on what we know from the original game and character motivations and things like that. But since doing that video, I've had a few conversations with people where it's kind of naturally led us down the route of talking about Materia Fusion. And this has been an idea that's grown and grown for me over the last few weeks. And the bulk of this has happened during the time that I was doing the research for my recent Zack Fair video. So don't forget to check that one out. Personally, I feel like it is one of the better videos that I've done so far. For now though, let's get back to Materia Fusion, and it is a pretty major mechanic in Crisis Core. And we're going to talk about how we could see that being implemented in Remake going forwards. Don't forget to drop a like and sub on the video for future content. The support on these videos means a lot, and it really does help the channel grow. But enough of that, let's get to it. Materia Fusion is a system in Crisis Core where you can improve certain aspects of the materia that you own. These aspects range from changing the type of the materia, creating an entirely new materia, or amplifying the stat boosts that come with the materia in question. For example, if you wanted to change the type of the materia, the easiest version of this is when you combine any elemental materia with a status materia. This leads to the creation of a dark version of the elemental materia that you used. So for example, if you were to take poison and fuse it with thunder, you'd get dark thunder, which is a variant of the thunder materia that inflicts poison and silence as well as thunder damage. When it comes to creating new materia, combining a command with a status or magic materia will result in a new materia being created. Examples of this include Thunder and Power Attack. When you fuse them together you get a Thunder Blade, or if you combine Vital Slash and Libra, you get a Blast Wave materia. Loads of different examples like that. And the final and most common type of fusion in Crisis Core is where you fuse two of the same materia in order to boost its stats. So for example, you take a Fire materia that's got a Spirit 1, and then you fuse it with another Fire materia that's got Spirit plus 1, and that'll result in a Fire materia with Spirit plus 2. There's a lot more variation to it, and there are optimal ways to max out the stats of the materia and things like that, so you can basically be godlike. But I'm not going to delve any deeper into the Materia Fusion system from Crisis Core. Instead, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at whether or not it would be plausible to see this system or something similar incorporated into Final Fantasy VII Remake. And when we look at some of the questions regarding materia going forwards, we can begin to speculate on the ways that Materia Fusion could be used. Firstly, the materia that we do have from Remake is mostly, if not all, going to be mastered materia by the time we get to Remake 2. This means that going forwards, the only way that these materias can become stronger passively is purely by the stats of the character that wields the materia growing over time. This means that unless some new system is implemented in Remake 2, we won't see any further growth for pretty much all of the materia that we had in Part 1. And this would be disappointing, obviously, especially given how much of the journey there seemingly is left to go. But if Materia Fusion was brought in as a system, this could be avoided. Now, this is just me speculating and me proposing what I'd consider doing. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to do it, but I do think it's quite a good idea. My proposal to resolve this issue is similar to the stat boosting aspect of Crisis Core's Materia Fusion system. Like I went over earlier, when you fuse two of the same types of materia, the stat boost applied to those materias is added together. In Remake, I'd do it slightly differently. The way I'd do it is when you take two mastered materia of the same type and fuse them together, it creates a plus version of that materia. For example, if you were to take two mastered fire materias and fuse them, you would receive a brand new Fire Plus materia. Now this materia would be back at level 0 with no XP, and only the basic fire spell would be accessible. However, the fire spell that you could cast would, I would say, be slightly weaker than the Faraga spell that you could previously cast. This means that initially you will take a hit on damage output, but when this materia levels up, the fire that you can cast would be a bit stronger than the Faraga from the original materia. And finally, once you master that Fire Plus materia, the damage would be far greater than it would be just using the base fire materia. And this could be implemented to, I would say, pretty much all of the green materia that we get in the first part of Remake. It would reset the level of the materia, but it would boost its base output to a far greater level than it was previously. And if we don't see something done about this, we could easily see a lot of the starter magic materias that we get in Remake being outclassed and useless extremely early in the next part of Remake. It'd give us the motivation to fuse our already mastered materias and go through the growth cycle one more time, because the benefits would far outweigh the effort that we put into it. It made sense that we were limited on what materia that we had in Remake, given that the game takes place in such a closed-off area of the world. But once we get out into Gaia in part 2, we're going to need to be able to tear down those barriers. Otherwise, like I've said, all of the materia that we had in part 1 is going to quickly become useless. As for other materias, this demand for fusion changes a little bit, as a lot of these materias like elemental, magnify, parry, things like that, they won't need to see their output be scaled, as they'll still be useful regardless. You know, they'll still do the same job that they always did. Although I do think that the scarcity of some of these materias could be an issue, and this is somewhere else that Materia Fusion could give us a solution. Now, in the original game, when you mastered a materia, it gave birth to a new materia of the exact same type, at 0 XP. Now, in Remake, this hasn't happened, and adding this now after we've already established that materia doesn't give birth would be, well, it'd be a bit stupid. A fusion system offers us an alternative, however. Once you've mastered a materia as detailed previously, you can fuse it with another mastered materia of the same type and level it up. But as an alternative to this, another option could be that you could take a mastered materia and downgrade it, splitting one mastered fire materia into 2 0 XP fire materias, brand new fire materias basically. This would bring materia birth back into the fold, and it'd give you a reward for mastering a materia. Also, it'd increase the possibilities for fusing materias together, because if you've got a larger pool of materia to work with, there's obviously more that you can do. And this goes especially when it comes to things like command and support materia, as you'd have a degree of control over what you can do with the materia, and in essence you could farm them to get whatever you want for your desired loadout. It'd take a bit of effort, but you could do it. And this could easily lead to things like new materias like Elemental Plus that boost the elemental impact of the paired materia, but you have to fuse 2 elemental materias together. Now, this is something that I wouldn't even entertain at the moment because I've not got enough, and it'd just be silly. I'd be down to 1 elemental materia then, and why would I want to do that? But if I can break down materias and create new materias, that problem goes out the window. We could also see new materias being created. We could see things like a Deathblow materia being fused with a Magnify materia for a Slash-All materia or something like that. We could also see things like Deathblow being paired with Fire to create a Flameblade materia. And if this system was brought into Remake, then the possibilities would be massive, and it'd almost certainly solve the potential issue with Remake going forwards regarding materia, because you would be able to reset the materia. Even if we had a full loadout of every materia from Remake, completely mastered, we'd quickly find that it's entirely inadequate for the journey going forwards, and then we discover Materia Fusion. It'd take one of the greatest systems in all of JRPGs, in my opinion, and bring it into a more modern age, expanding the possibilities and combinations of materia that you have access to, while also giving you more control over the acquisition of these materias. The big question would be implementation. Now, the obvious vehicle for this would probably be Chadley. We already know him, he's already involved in the creation and synthesis of materia in Remake. But for some reason, I've got the idea in my head, and I don't know where I've seen it, but I think I've seen an interview or something like that, where they've said that Chadley won't be in Remake Part 2. But when I've looked for it, I can't find it anywhere. So I possibly dreamed that, I don't know. If anyone's got any information on Chadley, you know, whether or not it's been confirmed, if we will or won't see him in future parts of Remake, let me know. But I do think Chadley would be a brilliant candidate for this Materia Fusion system. But even if it's not him, it could just be a new functionality added to materia shops outside of Midgar. Maybe the shops in the slums couldn't afford the equipment required. However, once you get out of Midgar and maybe even up on the other plate, there are shops that do have Materia Fusion stations. Who knows? But I do feel like it'd be a brilliant way to scale up the materia that we already have. But that's my thoughts on this one. What about you? Do you think Materia Fusion could be a good system to bring into Final Fantasy VII Remake in the future? Or do you think we'll see some other solution? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Please do drop a like and subscribe for future content, but more importantly than anything, have a great day.